So Joshua took control of the entire land, just as the Lord had instructed Moses. He gave it to the people of Israel as their special possession, dividing the land among the tribes. So the land finally had rest from war. What's up, cool people? My name's Matt. Welcome back to our Bible study. Alrighty. So, we are looking at Joshua chapter 11. The Israelites actually just got done defeating the southern armies because of the whole thing with the Gibeonites being allies, kind of. Like, they made an agreement, and basically, because of that, Israel was sort of obligated to help protect the Gibeonites. So, with the other kingdoms of the south attacking Gibeon, Israel mounted a counterattack and basically just rode that momentum all the way through, wiping out the entirety of the southern armies. And now, it seems like we're moving to the northern armies in chapter 11 here. So here we go. Joshua chapter 11. And forgive me if I butcher any of these names, but whatever. When King Jabin of Hazor heard what had happened, he sent messages to the following kings: King Jobab of Madon, the king of Shimron, the king of Akshaph, all the kings of the northern hill country, the kings in the Jordan Valley south of Galilee, the kings in the Galilean foothills, the kings of Naphoth Dor on the west, the kings of Canaan, both east and west, the kings of the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Jebusites in the hill country, and the Hivites in the towns on the slopes of Mount Hermon in the land of Mizpah. So, that sounds like a lot of kings getting involved there, just saying. And they're all probably going to try and fight against the Israelites here. Let me just look at the footnotes here. Hebrew, rather than says in the Jordan Valley south of Galilee, Hebrew says in the Arabah south of Kinnereth. So Kinnereth would have been the other name for Galilee, I guess. And it's starting to look like Arabah, given the multiple times that it's come up. Arabah just is kind of loosely translated valley. But anyway. And then Galilean foothills. Okay, Hebrew says the Shephelah instead of the foothills there. And with that being capitalized, I assume that's a replacement for specifically the Galilean foothills. Or maybe not. Maybe it should be read as like the Galilean Shephelah. But to my knowledge, the Shephelah was just one place. It wasn't one of those things like we've seen with the term Arabah, where it's pretty much translated as a more general word. Shephelah, to my understanding, still seems to be like an actual proper noun with no like multi-use translation for multiple places. But I could be wrong on that. That's just my understanding thus far. I don't know. If we see it again later, maybe we'll know. Especially if it mentions different foothills. Anywho. So yeah, lots of kings. Well, they haven't necessarily united as of yet, but King Jabin is sending messages to these kings, presumably with the idea of getting them to work together. But anyway, verse 4. All these kings came out to fight. Their combined armies formed a vast horde, and with all their horses and chariots, they covered the landscape like the sand on the seashore. The kings joined forces and established their camp around the water near Merom to fight against Israel. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "Do not be afraid of them. By this time tomorrow I will hand all of them over to Israel as dead men. Then you must cripple their horses and burn their chariots." Okay. So yes, they are all coming out to fight against Israel. And God says, don't be afraid, though, that they're going to be victorious. So, no in-between things going poorly this time around, like there was in between Jericho and Ai. I guess they're, riding high, figuratively speaking, on the momentum from other recent victories in the southern kingdoms. But anyway. Alright. Verse 7. Sorry, hold on. My brain just hears Erba from Final Fantasy 3. No, not quite. Erba. Not Erba. Anyway, okay. Verse 7. So Joshua and all his fighting men traveled to the water near Merom and attacked suddenly. And the Lord gave them victory over their enemies. The Israelites chased them as far as Greater Sidon and Mizrephoth Maim. Maim? I don't know. Mizrephoth Maim, sure. And eastward into the valley of Mizpah, until not one enemy warrior was left alive. Then Joshua crippled the horses and burned all the chariots as the Lord had instructed. Joshua then turned back and captured Hazor and killed its king. Hazor had at one time been the capital of all these kingdoms. The Israelites completely destroyed every living thing in the city, leaving no survivors. Not a single person was spared. And then Joshua burned the city. Okay, so the opposing armies had camped near Merom, but then Joshua and his men went there and just kind of launched a surprise attack. And then they were victorious. It's not going into great detail as of yet of how they were victorious. It's not giving us, like, the battle strategy like it did. I think that was actually when they fought against Ai, where they had, like, the main group come out to fight, but then run away, and then, like, a smaller subset snuck into the town, burned it, and basically then they had, like, a pincer attack on the armies. Anyway, we're not getting details like that as to their strategy or, how exactly they fought all these armies. It just says the Lord gave them victory. But then chasing ensues, just to try and make sure they're not leaving the opposing armies alive. And then, in fact, they specifically go to Hazor, which was the town that King Jabin, lived in and ruled over, the one who had sent messages to all the other kings. They specifically went after him and destroyed the city, burned it all. And yeah. So then we get to verse 12. Joshua slaughtered all the other kings and their people, completely destroying them, just as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded. But the Israelites did not burn any of the towns built on mounds except Hazor, which Joshua burned. And the Israelites took all the plunder and livestock of the ravaged towns for themselves. But they killed all the people, leaving no survivors. As the Lord had commanded his servant Moses, so Moses commanded Joshua. And Joshua did as he was told, carefully obeying all the commands that the Lord had given Moses. I assume that is just in reference to, what things they would have kept, what they would have destroyed, and definitely it sounds like the commands regarding not leaving the people alive were followed quite thoroughly in the midst of all this. I just realized I don't think I read that footnote. There's that Hebrew term meaning consecration of things to the Lord by destroying or giving as an offering. But either way, none of it is left as it was before by a long shot. It says they didn't burn any of the towns built on mounds, except Hazor, which I assume Hazor would be singled out because of King Jabin being sort of the lead conspirator in this effort to fight against Israel. So, it says they didn't burn any of the towns. That doesn't mean that they left any of the people alive, or that they didn't end up, destroying a bunch of, other things in and around those towns. Anyway, verse 16. So Joshua conquered the entire region, the hill country, the entire Negev, the whole area around the town of Goshen, the western foothills, the Jordan Valley, the mountains of Israel, and the Galilean foothills. The Israelite territory now extended all the way from Mount Halak, which leads up to Seir in the south, as far north as Baal Gad, at the foot of Mount Hermon in the valley of Lebanon. Joshua killed all the kings of those territories, waging war for a long time to accomplish this. No one in this region made peace with the Israelites except the Hivites of Gibeon. All the others, whatever. For the Lord hardened their hearts and caused them to fight the Israelites, so they were completely destroyed without mercy, as the Lord had commanded Moses. And you see, if it weren't for the prior deception and basically tricking the Israelites into making a peace treaty of sorts, the Hivites of Gibeon would also have been destroyed in amongst all this, I'm sure. They might have been destroyed along with the southern kingdoms, I don't know. But, yeah. So it sounds like the vast majority, if not the entirety, of the Promised Land has now essentially been conquered. It does say they waged war for a long time to accomplish this. It doesn't really specify how long that long time was, but it definitely wasn't as seemingly quickly as maybe it was with the southern kingdoms. I don't know. So we've got basically all the northern armies conquered, it seems, for sure, in amongst all this fighting. And lots of territory. All of this was taken over just in this recent set of wars, or whatever you want to call them. Footnote there at Jordan Valley. See, now that says the Shephelah, comma, the Arabah in the Hebrew. So, I don't know. Maybe the Shephelah was something that, extended out sort of around multiple of these areas that are mentioned, because I think it had that footnote at the Galilean foothills before, yeah. So maybe that just sort of extended through multiple sub-regions within the Promised Land. But in any case, lots of territory conquered. Possibly the entirety of the Promised Land now. Other than, well, they still kind of took ownership of Gibeon. They just didn't fight the people there because of the agreement that was made. Anywho, let me get to verse 21 and kind of wrap up the chapter here. During this period, Joshua destroyed all the descendants of Anak, who lived in the hill country of Hebron, Debir, Anab, and the entire hill country of Judah and Israel. He killed them all and completely destroyed their towns. None of the descendants of Anak were left in all the land of Israel, though some still remained in Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod. So Joshua took control of the entire land, just as the Lord had instructed Moses. He gave it to the people of Israel as their special possession, dividing the land among the tribes. So the land finally had rest from war. So yes, that pretty much makes it official. It was the entirety of the Promised Land that they had conquered after this. Now, as far as it mentioning the descendants of Anak, if I recall correctly, those were believed to be a sort of giant, which was part of the reason that way back, like 40 years or so prior to this, when, the scouts from Israel first looked at the Promised Land to see whether, to see what their strategy would be, or whether or not they wanted to actually go there. A lot of the scouts pretty much said, no, these people are way too big and strong. We're going to die if we try and attack them. And in amongst that, they mentioned the descendants of Anak. I mean, it still isn't necessarily a good excuse for all their fear, because guess what? Joshua and the Israelites now have conquered all the Promised Land and defeated the vast majority of these giants, or whatever they were. There were still some left alive, kind of close by, but a lot of them were killed either through all this fighting or something related to that, it seems. But then after all this fighting's done and the Israelites own the Promised Land, there was rest from war. Yay! At least a moment of peace. So anyway, yeah. That does it for chapter 11. Alright, so last chapter we had Israel conquering the southern kingdoms. This chapter, we've got even more kingdoms going across the northern part of the Promised Land. And after a great deal of fighting that it doesn't give a ton of detail on, but big point being, Israel now pretty much has conquered the vast majority of the Promised Land. Maybe not all of it, but like nearly all of it. Not quite sure what happens from here, but I'd imagine a lot less fighting. Anyway, as always, like and share if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel and click the bell if you're on YouTube to get updates when I post new videos. If you're seeing this over on Rumble, give me a follow there. Make sure you look down in the description to get info on other social media pages and all that good stuff. And leave comments down below there with any thoughts you have. So that'll do it for now. Hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I'll see you soon for another video. But whatever the case is, till next time, stay cool, people.